You know what surprised me when I first saw this study? 87%. That's the number of people with type 2 diabetes who are no longer diabetic after 1 year. 87%. If that sounds too good to be true, trust me, I thought the same thing. I expected some miracle supplement or secret pill. But nope. No magic powder. No one weird trick. It was diet and exercise. Boring? Maybe. Powerful? Absolutely. Here's what makes this so interesting. Everyone in the study was already getting standard medical care. They were on glucose-lowering medication and getting the usual advice like try to eat healthier and get some exercise. That part alone barely moved the needle. The real change came when they added a structured lifestyle program. Not extreme, not starvation, just specific, consistent, supervised changes. So what did they actually do? Their diet was designed to be high in protein and lower in calories. About 25% of calories came from protein, 50% from carbohydrates, and 25% from fat. And they ate about 500 calories less than what their body needed each day. The goal was simple: steady weight loss, about 1 to 2 pounds per week. Not crash dieting, not living on shakes. Real food, just less of it, and more protein to protect muscle. And then there was exercise. Not 2-hour gym marathons. Cardio for about 20 to 30 minutes a day at a moderate intensity, around 60 to 70% of max heart rate. Think brisk walking, cycling, or something that makes you breathe harder, but still lets you talk. On top of that, resistance training, weight training, about 20 minutes, 2 to 3 times per week. Just enough to tell the muscles, hey, stay with me, we still need you. Over the year, something pretty remarkable happened. The people in the lifestyle program lost an average of about 43 pounds. That's not a typo. Meanwhile, the control group, the people who only got standard care, lost about 3 pounds, and even that wasn't statistically meaningful. In other words, it could have just been random. But weight loss was only part of the story. The lifestyle group lost body fat, including visceral fat, the dangerous kind that wraps around your organs. Liver fat dropped. Fasting insulin went down. Insulin resistance improved. Inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein fell significantly. And here's a detail that really matters. They did not lose muscle mass. That's huge. Losing fat while keeping muscle is exactly what you want, especially if you're over 40 and trying to protect your metabolism. Now let's talk about that 87% number, because this is where things can get misunderstood. In science, we don't usually say reversal. We say remission. Remission means your blood sugar is below the diabetes threshold without medication. Specifically, their hemoglobin A1C had to be under the diabetes cutoff, and they had to be off diabetes meds for at least 3 months. That way, the numbers weren't being artificially lowered by drugs. So when we say 87% went into remission, we're talking about real metabolic change, not just good lab numbers on pills. And if you're thinking, okay, but maybe this study was just a fluke, that's a fair question. So let's compare it to other big studies. One of the most famous is the DIRECT trial from the UK. That study used diet-based weight loss and got about a 46% remission rate at 1 year. Another well-known program, Virta Health, reported around 25% remission at 1 year. Though that wasn't a randomized trial, so it's not a perfect comparison. Still, 87% stands out. It's in a league of its own. Some participants in this study didn't start with full diabetes. They started with prediabetes. Among them, about 73% returned to normal blood sugar. Interestingly, the remission rate was actually higher in the diabetes group than in the pre-diabetes group. That sounds backward, right? But what it likely means is that going from diabetic to non-diabetic may be easier than going from pre-diabetic to completely normal. Either way, the results were impressive in both groups. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The amount of weight people lost mattered a lot. The more weight they lost, the higher the remission rate. In the group that lost more than 15% of their body weight, 94% went into remission. That tells us something important. This isn't about one specific diet trick. It's about fat loss, especially fat stored in places like the liver and pancreas, where it interferes with insulin signaling. And another thing that surprised researchers, there was no plateau. You know how most diets go. You lose weight for a few months, then everything stalls, and sometimes the weight creeps back. In this trial, weight loss kept going, and if anything, it sped up slightly after 6 months. That's rare. It suggests that when people are supported, monitored, and given a clear plan, the body doesn't always fight back as hard as we expect. Safety matters too. High-protein diets often get blamed for kidney problems, especially in people with diabetes. But in this study, kidney function didn't deteriorate. There were no serious adverse events linked to the program. That doesn't mean everyone should jump into a high-protein diet without thinking. It does mean that, in this context, under medical supervision, it was safe. Now, before we all declare victory and throw away our glucose meters, let's talk about the limits. This study only had about 60 participants. That's not tiny, but it's not massive either. And there's another big detail. Everyone had been diagnosed within the last 6 months. They were newly diagnosed. That matters because the longer someone has had type 2 diabetes, the harder remission tends to be. Researchers like Roy Taylor, who led the DIRECT study, have suggested that after about 8 to 10 years, remission becomes much more difficult. Not impossible, but harder. Also, this study followed people for 1 year. For a chronic disease like diabetes, that's short. The big question is sustainability. Can people keep the weight off? Because history tells us this is where things get tricky. In the DIRECT trial, remission dropped from 46% at 1 year to 36% at 2 years. Some people regained weight. Some slipped back into diabetes. And in this new study, participants had a lot of support. Doctors, nurses, coaches, regular check-ins. What happens when that safety net goes away? When it's just you, your fridge, and your schedule? That's why the real takeaway here isn't everyone can cure diabetes. It's this. For many people, especially those diagnosed recently, type 2 diabetes is not necessarily a one-way street. With enough weight loss, through diet and exercise, the underlying biology can improve. Fat comes out of the liver and pancreas. Insulin sensitivity improves. Blood sugar normalizes. That's not magic. That's physiology. And it's also not tied to one specific diet style. Remission has been shown with higher carb diets, lower carb diets, Mediterranean-style diets, and everything in between. The common thread is calorie reduction and weight loss. So when someone tells you their diet is the only way, be skeptical. The best diet is the one you can stick with long-term. If you're thinking about trying something like this yourself, there's one thing I really want to stress. Do it with medical guidance. As blood sugar improves, medications often need to be reduced. If you keep taking the same dose while your glucose is dropping, you can end up with low blood sugar, which can be dangerous. This is not medical advice, and I'm not your doctor. But please don't treat this like a solo experiment. Work with someone who can monitor labs and adjust meds safely. There's also a mindset shift here that matters. A lot of people think diabetes management is just about controlling numbers with medication. And medication absolutely has its place. But these studies suggest that, at least early on, the disease process itself can be changed. That doesn't mean it's easy. Losing 40 pounds is hard. Exercising consistently is hard. Changing habits is hard. But it does mean the effort can lead to something more than just better control. It can lead to remission. And here's the part that doesn't get enough attention. Muscle matters. Resistance training and protein intake helped people keep their muscle while losing fat. That's crucial, especially as we age. Muscle isn't just for strength. It's a metabolic organ. It helps clear glucose from the blood. It improves insulin sensitivity. Losing muscle while dieting can make long-term success harder. So if you're focusing only on the scale and ignoring strength, you're missing part of the picture. So what does all this mean in practical terms? It means that if you've been recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, there is real, solid scientific evidence that lifestyle changes can make a massive difference. Not just a small improvement, a potential remission. It also means that sustainability matters more than perfection. You don't need the perfect diet. You need a diet you can live with. You don't need extreme workouts. You need consistent movement. And yes, the holy grail is keeping it off, keeping the weight off, keeping the diabetes off. That's where individualization comes in. Some people do better with lower carbs. Some do better with Mediterranean-style eating. Some prefer structured programs. Others prefer flexibility. There is no single path. The only wrong path is the one you quit because it's too miserable. So the bottom line? Science is showing us that for many people, type 2 diabetes is not always permanent. Especially early on, the body can recover a surprising amount of function when fat is reduced and muscles are used. That's hopeful, not hype. Hope backed by data. If this changed how you think about diabetes, hit subscribe. I break down health science like this every week. Real research, no miracle nonsense, just what actually works and what still needs more answers.